The Nike Metcon 9 versus the Adidas Dropset Trainer 2. This has been a comparison that a lot of folks have asked about, so let's dive in to 5 major differences between these shoes. So number 1 with their differences is their midsole construction. So both models feature this like dual density midsole. So essentially in the Adidas Dropset Trainer 2, you have a 4-foot midsole that's a little bit more plush and responsive, and then the density of the heel back here is a little bit more dense and stable. In the Nike Metcon 9, the midsole has a slightly higher density towards the outskirts of the shoe, whereas the center of the shoe is a little bit more plush. Now, which model is more stable and responsive? Both shoes are plenty stable. However, I will say the Adidas Dropset Trainer 2 does feel like it has a bit more stability throughout compared to the Nike Metcon 9, and that is because our second difference, which is the stack height of each shoe and the toe spring. So with the Adidas Dropset Trainer 2, you don't have a ton of toe spring and you have a lower stack height overall. This gives this shoe a much more like low to the ground feeling. You don't have a ton of rock in the shoe when you're lifting, and it feels a little bit more like a weightlifting shoe in nature at times compared to a traditional training shoe. In the Nike Metcon 9, you have a thicker forefoot and then you have a thicker heel. And with this heel back here, you still have the hyperlift plate, so it is lifting you up even further off the ground. And then you also have a bit more toe spring compared to the Dropset Trainer 2. So if you do want a slightly more dense and stable shoe, I would say probably err toward the Dropset Trainer 2 regarding your midsole construction asks. The third major difference to note between these shoes is their upper constructions. So in the Adidas Dropset Trainer 2, you have a mesh and textile upper. The upper on this model feels a lot more lightweight, and I think it breathes a little bit better compared to the Nike Metcon 9. This shoe has more of like an athletic build to it, and then you also have this breathability through the midsole here, so you do get some ventilation through the bottom of this shoe. In the Nike Metcon 9, you have a mesh upper with some haptic overlays, and then you also have these very thick rubber overlays on the medial and lateral midfoot. It gives this shoe a slightly more bulkier feel and fit, and the breathability is a little bit less in the Nike Metcon 9 once again compared to the Dropset Trainer 2. And then if we compare the Metcon 9's breathability to like something like the Metcon 7 and 8, I think the breathability is on par with the Metcon 7 and a little bit better than the 8, which wasn't the most breathable Metcon to date. The fourth major difference to note about these shoes is their outsole construction. So over here in the Nike Metcon 9, you have a full rubber outsole, but then you have this split here. Now this split has given some folks issues with rope climb, so definitely keep an eye out on that. There's actually a cool short floating around right now talking about this, but this was something that bothered me with this shoe to begin with. I find that this shoe actually kind of collapses inwards, and I think that's because of this like outsole split and how this material just isn't as dense here on the medial midfoot. But this break right here is essentially what is giving some folks problems. But regarding grip, the shoe does a pretty good job in most contexts. So for lifting, cross training on different surfaces and whatnot, the Nike Metcon 9's grip is usually on point. The durability of that middle part is just kind of problematic for rope climbs for certain contexts. In the Adidas Dropset Trainer 2, you also have a full rubber outsole, but you also have this cut here, which you do get some ventilation from. Now, what I will say with the Dropset Trainer 2's outsole is if you're doing a lot of work outside on concrete, this outsole might actually fade faster than the Nike Metcon 9. So the durability for the Dropset Trainer 2's outsole can take a hit if you're trying to train outdoors a lot and you're doing a lot of high friction activities on concrete. Just keep an eye on that. I think if you're using this shoe primarily for gym use, that's not going to be an issue, but definitely keep an eye on that. But overall, the grip of this shoe has been pretty stellar throughout. The fifth major difference to note about these models is their overall sizing and fit. Both shoes have a slightly wider fit compared to their predecessors, and when you put them side by side, they're both pretty comparable. However, I will say, I think the Dropset Trainer 2 actually feels a little bit wider, and that's because the toe box doesn't have as aggressive as a taper, and with this lighter upper construction, I find that it gives you a little bit more upper volume compared to the Nike Metcon 9. I do think the Nike Metcon 9 will be suitable for most foot anatomies regarding its width. Now, is it going to be the best shoe for double E width feet? Not necessarily, but I have an E width foot, and I don't have any issues with this model, and it has a similar athletic fit to other Nike Metcon models. Overall though, I think those are like the 5 biggest construction features that can really influence each shoe's durability and performance. But that being said, let's talk about the performance comparisons between these shoes. All right, so now let's cover some performance comparisons between these shoes. So which model is better for lifting? I'm going to give the edge to the Dropset Trainer 2. I love that this shoe doesn't have a ton of toe spring, but still articulates pretty well through the forefoot, and it has plenty of stability. So whether you are wanting to do weightlifting, deadlifts, squats, whatever it might be, this shoe I think should deliver a pretty strong performance. And I see it as a really good shoe for that recreational lifter that plans to do like free weight and machine exercise as well because of its stability and its outsole grip. The Nike Metcon 9 also works really well for lifting. You get a good stability with the shoe, similar to the prior Nike Metcon models. However, I just don't really love this this shoe compared to the prior models that came out in the Nike Metcon line, because it does just have like kind of a bulky feel to it. So that said, you can lift in both shoes, then they will both work really well. But if we had to give one clear edge to one of these models that I think is a little bit more dialed in for lifting specifically, I'm giving that to the Dropset Trainer 2. Now, which model is better for CrossFit? So honestly, it's kind of a toss-up between these shoes in my opinion. The Dropset Trainer 2 isn't necessarily designed for CrossFit, and Adidas doesn't say this shoe is designed for CrossFit on their site, but a lot of folks have used them for that context, and they've done a pretty good job. Now, what I will say is that if you are somebody that wants that singular shoe dedicated to CrossFit, I think there are better models out there that are a little bit more dialed in. The Rad 1, the Born Primitive Savage 1, the Reebok Nano 2.0, those are all models that I would probably take over the Dropset Trainer 2. But if you're like me and on a weekly basis you're lifting and then doing some WOD work here and there as conditioning, I think the Dropset Trainer 2 will work. And in the context of rope climbs, while I haven't done a ton of high volume rope climbs in the shoe, I haven't had breakdown issues yet, fingers crossed. So hopefully that stands true for most folks with this model as well. The Nike Metcon 9 also works well for CrossFit. You get a lot of the perks of the Metcon line that have been pretty standard throughout. So with this haptic overlay, you get a little bit more grip on the toe box. You do have a decently dense midsole, and the forefoot is pliable enough to make it work for box jumps, double unders and whatnot, and movements where you're basically going to be on the forefoot and a little bit more bouncy. And you still have a hyperlift plate back here for extra stability. Now I will say this plate, once again, similar to the Metcon 7 and 8, does take away from the shoe's overall versatility in certain WODs. And again, while I haven't had that issue, I would say be very conscious of this shoe's outsole construction right here where it breaks and there's foam exposed if you're doing a ton of rope climbs with a shoe and you're very feet reliant in doing so. So now, which model is outright better for CrossFit? Honestly, I think both shoes should work plenty fine. And I think if you're somebody that prioritizes your lifting in your WODs, go Dropset Trainer 2. And if you're somebody that wants a shoe that's a little bit more dialed in for CrossFit WODs, the Nike Metcon 9 will likely be a good call. Now, which shoe is better for versatile training? I'm gonna have to give the edge once again to the Dropset Trainer 2, and that's for one key reason. So with the Nike Metcon 9, can it work for versatile training sessions, cross training, and certain plyometric focus sessions? Yes. However, with this hyperlift plate back here in the heel, despite it being brought in a little bit compared to the 7 and 8, I still find that it kind of tanks this shoe's versatility. It is not the most comfortable shoe to do a ton of jumping in, and you're not really gonna be able to blend, I think, a lot of running or sprint work with your lifting in the shoe as easily because of this feature. So once again, that's a major knock on the shoe regarding its performance for versatility. So if you do go into the Nike Metcon 9, just keep in mind that it might not be the best shoe for like HIIT workouts or workouts where you're gonna be blending a little bit more running and whatnot into your sessions. With the Dropset Trainer 2, you also have a heel that's not the most forgiving for running, but I do think it is a little bit more pliable overall compared to the hyperlift plate. Sprinting in both of these shoes, for example, I would rather do so in the Dropset Trainer 2, and that's because it just doesn't beat you up nearly as much when you're decelerating. And I do like the overall lightweight build of this shoe in the context of versatile workouts because it keeps your foot a little bit cooler. Now, which model is better for running? To be quite honest, neither of these shoes are great for running. So if you're somebody who wants that shoe for 1, 2, even 3 miles pre or post workout, I don't think either of these shoes will be that comfortable. Now, if you're wanting a shoe for sprints or shorter interval runs, so 400 meter or 800 meter bouts, where you're gonna be a lot more on the forefoot, both these shoes will be fine because the forefoot in both these shoes is responsive and pliable enough to accommodate that running ask. But again, if you want a shoe for like more hybrid focused training, I would say probably pass on these shoes and leave them primarily for lifting and CrossFit. Now, which shoe is better for daily wear? Both these shoes can technically work. I like that they're both wider in construction, so they are a little bit more comfortable to wear all day. However, if I had to give the edge to one of these shoes, I've worn the Dropset Trainer 2 or have naturally reached for them more on a daily wear basis compared to the Nike Metcon 9. I'm just not a big fan of this shoe's overall appearance. It looks really bulky. The heel is kind of uncomfortable at times. So while you can wear the Nike Metcon 9 out and about, it's definitely a shoe that I would say probably save for the gym compared to the Adidas Dropset Trainer 2 that you can wear a little bit more out and about. It's gonna be a little bit more forgiving, I think, if you're doing a lot of walking and running errands and whatnot. So when it comes to the price of these two shoes, you can expect to pay $150 USD for the Nike Metcon 9 and $130 USD for the Dropset Trainer 2. So that said, I think if you're much more recreational in nature and you want to save a little bit more money, go Dropset Trainer 2 because $130 is what the Metcon used to cost until this year when the price was increased by 20. This is Maui. He is a true shoe dog. He is here helping me film tonight, and he wants you to subscribe to the channel. So if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe down below. Now let's get back to the video. So when it comes to the sizing and fit of these models, I think most folks should be safe going true to size in the Nike Metcon 9 and the Adidas Dropset Trainer 2. Both these shoes do have slightly wider toe boxes compared to their predecessors. So if you do have a medium to slightly wider foot width, you should fit true to size in these models regarding the overall width through the forefoot, or at least how much room you feel you have in the forefoot. I have an E-width foot, and both of these shoes fit pretty well with different thicknesses of socks. Now I will say, if you're somebody that needs a little bit more medial midfoot support, the Dropset Trainer 2 does give you a little bit more compared to the Nike Metcon 9. I find that this shoe actually collapses a little bit. I talk about this in my full review of this model, but overall I think going true to size is a safe call in both of these shoes. All right, so I'm breaking down the weight, heel, toe drop, and insoles of these models. For my size 10 Adidas Dropset Trainer 2, we have a weight of 12.8 ounces. In my size 10 Nike Metcon 9, the weight comes out to 13.55 ounces. When it comes to their heel to toe drops, Nike has not disclosed what the drop is for the shoe, but I'm guessing it's 4 millimeters and it's consistent with prior Metcon models. For the Dropset Trainer 2, you have a heel to toe drop of 6 millimeters. Both these shoes do feature removable insoles, so you can take them out and put your own insole in. However, it is worth noting in both of these shoes, they don't have the highest profile uppers, so if you do have thick insoles, that could be problematic with both of these models. All right, now let's break down the construction of the Adidas Dropset Trainer 2 and the Nike Metcon 9. Up here on the toe box, you have an extended outsole layer that wraps up on both of these shoes. It does bias that big toe side. And then looking at the upper of these shoes, on the Dropset Trainer 2, you have a synthetic overlay that goes around the entirety of the shoe's toe box, and then you have a breathable mesh upper around the toe box as well. In the Metcon 9, you have a mesh upper with some haptic overlays that bias this medial forefoot side. Looking at the midfoot constructions, in the Dropset Trainer 2, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eyelets that go up, and you also have these 2 adjustable eyelets back here for getting a fit that works best for your foot anatomy. Over here in the Nike Metcon 9, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 eyelets that go up. Then looking at the tongue constructions, you do have a gusseted tongue in the Dropset Trainer 2 with an additional loop here for security and slightly longer and thinner shoelaces. In the Nike Metcon 9, you have a padded mesh tongue, and then you still have that lace lock loop here that serves as your core loop for tongue security. The tongue in the Metcon 9 is also gusseted. Looking at the midfoot construction in both these models, you have Adidas branding here on the lateral side, and then you have this wrap up here on the lateral side that goes from the midfoot into the heel. This gives you a little bit of additional support when it comes to lateral stability in this model. You also have this rubber wrap on the medial side of the shoe for additional grip and support for different activities. You have a textile and mesh overlay throughout the midfoot of this shoe. In the Nike Metcon 9, you have a rubber overlay here on the lateral side. You also have a mesh upper, and then looking at the medial midfoot, you have this super gaudy rubber rope climb guard that I've talked about many a times in all of my Metcon 9 content, and you also have a mesh and synthetic upper throughout the entirety of this shoe's midfoot. Looking at the heel construction of the Metcon 9, you have a padded mesh boot, and then looking at the midsole of the shoe, you have that dual density foam midsole throughout. This midsole is once again more dense on the outsides, whereas it's more plush on the insides, and then you also have that hyperlift insert back here in the heel. It does not stick as far into the shoe as the Metcon 7 and 8, but it is still pretty dang clunky. Looking at the Dropset Trainer 2, you have a padded mesh boot as well, and you also have this lip here. Now, this has bothered some folks in certain contexts where you are having a little bit of rub here. I would say you could probably just cut this off and it's probably not gonna be the biggest deal if you find that this tab rubs a little bit or you can't necessarily bend it down and keep it down. So definitely I would say don't be afraid to do that if you're feeling like it's bothering you that much. Looking at the midsole in this shoe, you have a dual density foam midsole throughout. So up here with this white foam midsole, it's a little bit more plush and responsive, whereas back here in the heel, it's a little bit more dense. And then looking at the outsole construction, you have a full rubber tread patterning, and you have this cutout here for ventilation. So this has a little bit more airflow going through the midfoot of this shoe. Looking at the Metcon 9, you have a full rubber outsole, and then once again, you do have this pretty aggressive break right here with this exposed foam that separates this rope guard. That's what also makes this shoe feel like it kind of internally caves on the medial side here. So just food for thought there if you are planning to invest in the shoe. And once again, both models feature removable insoles. If you have additional questions on either of these shoes constructions, drop a comment down below. All right guys, that wraps up this breakdown of the Adidas Dropset Trainer 2 and the Nike Metcon 9. If I had to give the edge to an overall winner, I'm going Adidas Dropset Trainer 2 this year. I think it's a stronger shoe, feels very athletic in nature, and it feels great when you're lifting. The Nike Metcon 9, it's an okay shoe, but I was hoping for a little bit more with an odd year model. If you have additional questions on the Dropset Trainer 2 or the Nike Metcon 9, drop a comment down below and I can help you navigate which model you should go with based on how you train. Just give me some context down in the comments or reach out to me via Instagram, whichever you prefer. And as always, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.